Well, it's September 24th, 2016. It's time for another entry in the Phoenix Rising project, and as you can see, a lot has happened. I'll show you everything. I'll show you the progress on the roof. Not completed yet, but getting there. Stucco almost all the way around, and yes, we did finally get our floors in, the subfloors anyway, the soil cement subfloors. Show you what I can, explain what I can, and give you an idea of what's going on. So let's get right to it. Getting in the floors was mainly just hard work. It took so much digging and moving around to finally get the floors level. But once we got the floors level, the soil cement went in very well because it's contained around the edges. If you're dealing with an area that's contained around the edges, then once you get it level, it's very simple. Mix the soil cement, just sprinkle it out till the whole area is covered with the Portland. Mix it up with the tiller, and then flood it and float it. You don't be afraid to pour the water. I mean, you got to pour a lot of water on it. I flooded each one of these areas at least 3 times. Flooded it to about that deep with water. It takes a lot of water, and it's got to be contained so that the water goes in and activates everything and sets it up. You got to have a lot of water. Another nice thing about the water is then you can get more of the detail of the level. When you flood it with water, then you can see where there's some areas that might be high or low, and you can take your float and float it over and also get a nice finish and things. Now, talk about some of the pros and cons of soil cement. Pro, much cheaper, makes very stable subflooring area. Cons, it's not quite as hard or impact resistant as regular concrete. It needs something on top of it, but it's excellent soil stability so that you can just put a thin cap over it instead of a big slab, which is what we're going to do. We're going to put a cement cap over this, about 1 inch or 2, and save a lot of money and a lot of effort. Since it's already level and it's firm, all I got to do is pour the cement, the concrete on here, and just trowel it over. It'll go really good. Impact resistance, very important. It's not quite as impact resistant as you can see what happened here when I dropped a roofing panel, and naturally the thing had to go with a point right into it, but that's no big deal. I just go over it and it'll hold up with the concrete. It's still very stable, but it's not perfect, but it works if you get the conditions right and follow a few principles, and it is stable, and this will hold a cement top with no problem. This patch here is an excellent example of soil cement gone bad when it doesn't take. The main factor that contributed to this was that it was not contained. I found that out the hard way. In order to make successful soil cement, it has to be contained. If it's not contained around the edges, the water won't stay, it won't sink down, it won't activate the Portland to stabilize the soil and make it hard. The water will just wash off, washing off most of the Portland with it, and you'll just end up with nothing. So that is one of the main things about soil cement. It has to be contained. The main thing about soil cementing is edges. See this area where the edge was raised up? It's always going to break and crumble along the edge because it's a little bit more crumbly than solid concrete. You don't want unsupported edges like this. In areas where you have something to contain the edges, it works just fine. Like when I do this for real, this was just a temporary thing, I'm going to put a wall of bags around this and just fill the soil cement around it. The bags will contain it very nice because the main thing you got to worry about is the edges. If you don't have an edge to break off, it's nice and hard, but the edges will crumble. A cement float can be pretty expensive, so I made my own with some 2x3s right here. It's very simple. Just a 2x3 cross piece, just hobbled together with some screws on an 8-foot 2x3. Actually worked out really nice because the 2x3s are heavy. So once you get the water flowing real good and you get it real deep, it literally will just float, and a lot of times the weight will just do the work. It's actually a very simple thing. If you just pull, it'll just smooth it out and make a real nice surface. If you push, you can start moving sections that may be high or something. Like if you find a high spot, you can push the fluid soil cement into a low spot and then go back over it a couple of times with the float until it's nice and even. But it cost me $3. Simple, cheap, disposable. Can be repurposed, recycled. Make the green weenies happy. But simple tool, and it got the job done. Floated the floors real nice. Here's the tools and materials you're going to need for a modernized version of something very ancient. A hybrid lime plaster / stucco. Gonna need lime. Just go into any home improvement store and ask for masonry lime. They'll know exactly what you're talking about. Just normal concrete. Water, of course. Doesn't have to be beautiful water. Over here, we have sifted clay from our soil. Just take the dirt and run it through a sieve. It comes out real nice. There's the clay composition. You're gonna need your mixer, your measure, most important, your consistent measure, then scoop, just little tiny tools. So, let's get going and I'll show you how this is done. Okay, we're going to start out with 3 of these measures of water. Water goes first inside the mixer. 1, 2, and 3. There's all the water we need. Don't want to add any more. I'm gonna plug the mixer in, turn it on, and get it going. Now, keep following. First thing you add is your reactants. First thing you add is 2 of these measures of lime. You want to add the reactants first. Get them thoroughly mixed in with the water while they're liquid, because that's going to start your chemical reaction. They're what makes it hard, gives it stickiness and workability, and makes it waterproof. The lime is the most important, that's why it goes in first. The lime is an exothermic reaction, makes it waterproof, it'll even cure underwater. And it makes it sticky, so that it won't fall off of your wall. There's 2 measures. Next is the concrete. The Portland gives it hardness, and the nice little pebbles that are in commercial concrete give it something to bind to, a solid matrix. Gives it incredible strength. It dries extremely hard. You want that thoroughly mixed in with the water too. Start the chemical reaction of the Portland. Don't forget the Portland's also a form of lime. So basically what we're doing is doubling up on our lime. Different forms of it so that we get a good reaction. We start out 2-2. Two concrete. Always make sure and wear gloves when handling this. Do not forget that lime and Portland cement are caustic and can cause skin damage if you get too much of it on your hands. We're working in the open air, so it's not as important, but make sure you're not breathing too much of this in. And yes, it's a good idea to have something over your eyes. But I don't know if you could see this, if it'll adjust or not, but as you can see right now, we got a liquid mix. The balance, then we simply start adding our dirt, and we keep on adding it until it gets to the consistency we want. And that's it. It takes about 19 cans of the soil before it finally reaches the consistency you want, which is just like this. And applying this, there's no point in trying to fight it or try and make it nice and smooth and pretty. With these walls, there's only one thing you can do. Embrace the ruggedness, the unevenness of the material. You're not going for a sleek, modern look. You're going for a rugged, rocky, castle wall, very manly look is what you're going for. The best way is to just throw it on with your hands. Fastest way, easiest way, gets the best results. You're able to cover up, see, like these pointed ends and these deep gullies, you just cover them up. The idea is to take a piece of clay and work it between your hands. You want it sort of halfway between a pancake and a ball. And working it between your hands makes it tacky, sticky. And then once you get it there, just throw it on. My sister described it very well. If you've ever cooked, done any baking, made homemade cookies, it's like you're throwing cookies against the wall. Because that's what you're doing. You're making a cookie, throw it against the wall. Splat. You make smaller ones, cover up little gaps that you might have missed. You'll come across big holes like this. Just get a big lump like this, throw it in there. It's filled. Then you could build around it. Build around these points that stick out. Make up a good, it's covered. Move on. It's actually a lot of fun. Of course, a couple of practical pieces of advice. Don't wear your nicest clothes. And don't be afraid to get dirty, because you are going to get nasty. One thing I recommend are these vinyl powder-free gloves. I've been using them in all kinds of housework for years. They're absolutely fantastic. Cheap, disposable, protect your hands. They actually make it much easier to handle this stuff because this doesn't stick to this vinyl as much. So, you know, it doesn't stick to your hands. It's easier to throw it. But they're cheap. I recommend you go to a restaurant supply place to get them. They seem to have the best prices. You can get a box of 100 for about $4.50. This stuff sticks to almost anything. It sticks to these plastic bags. It sticks to metal. It's a little bit harder to stick to wood, but if the wood's wet, it'll stick better. You can even bind it to the ground. Well, since it's made out of ground. But this is excellent stuff. And the nice thing about this is that anyone can do this application. Children could do this very easily. If you were a family building a house like this and you had some children, had 3 or 4 brats, turn them loose with the wall, show them what to do, and just have them splat these things all over the wall. They could do it very quickly. As a matter of fact, that's the amazing thing that I've discovered in this project, these kind of building methods. Yes, they're a lot of work. A lot of hand work, very labor intensive, but with the proper devices and a little bit of intelligence, is that this is work that literally anyone can do. Almost anyone who can walk. This is not work that requires specialized knowledge, just common sense, and it's hard work, but it's work that's within most able-bodied human beings' means. I've talked enough now, so I'm going to get back to making my mud pies. After a hard session of tossing your cookies, so to speak, those splots make a very nice texture. It looks sort of like a stone wall that's been built up with small stones and then covered with mortar. And as it dries, it turns whiter. You could see the impact of the lime. It may not seem like you're putting that much lime into the mix, but when it dries, the lime really comes out, and incredibly, remarkably hard. And I've noticed that this is waterproof. Once it dries, you spray water on it, it doesn't get absorbed into it, it bounces right off of it. But it makes a very nice texture. And you get a little bit of the handmade look, as you can see. The handprints, some of them get them preserved, which, you know what, I don't mind that. I like the look of it. It's actually very nice. When it dries, it's going to crack. You know what? Doesn't make any difference. They're just superficial cracks. Gives character to the wall, makes it look more like stone. And that's the really nice thing about it. It looks like a nice, heavy-duty stone wall. And here we're watching a master work, and this is the most difficult part, is trying to get these eyelids, these windows done right. But as you can see, if you do it right, with the right consistency, this stuff will stick to anything. Notice how she balls it, she works it, makes sure it get with her fingers, brings out the tack, makes it really sticky. The more you work it with your hands, the stickier it gets. And then a delicate throw. Very difficult. Every once in a while, some may fall off, but if it dries a little, you can go right back over it and it'll stick onto itself. You can build on it and build it, even if you have to build it a little bit at a time for very difficult areas, it will cover and stick onto anything. Now you may have noticed we haven't gone all the way up to the top because we're going to be putting the roof on and we don't want to run the risk of breaking it. So we stop at the last bag. We're going to put the roof on, and then after the roof is installed and everything's sealed, then we're going to go and finish it off. But it builds on itself very easily. If you're going to apply wet stucco over dry, just take a sprayer, like this spray bottle here, and wet it. And it'll stick on itself just fine. Well, day one of roof building done. You're dealing with a very dirty builder here, but take a little tour and see what we've done so far. See some of the first elements of this radical roof design. Let's go see what we got, shall we? Now, first thing that we're dealing with are the cross braces. 4x6s, and what they do, there's 3 of them, and they span across the strongest parts of the house. The kitchen, the bedroom, and the utility room. Now what the ultimate idea is I want to spread as much of the weight as possible to the strongest part of the house where the small pods are. So there's 3 of these, and then there's vertical upright 4x4s bolted onto the cross pieces and the center lines with lag bolts. Now this center line is key. It goes from the center of the kitchen all the way over to the door on the other side. That is the center line through the house. And then for the main span, we got something very strange here. an idea that I've been working on for months, and now I'm finally putting into practice. I call it a floating center support pillar. As far as I know, I don't claim to be an expert on every building technique known to mankind, but I've never encountered anything like it. As far as I know, no one's ever done it before. As far as I know it, this is the first and only structure you're ever going to find it. The idea is, I don't want to put a center post into the ground. This is where my stove's going to go. And since this main living area is so large, the idea is to spread the weight out from the center. So, first, we have this floating center support pillar, 4-foot 4x4, and everything is bolted with 1/2-inch bolts. Now, you have the center post, you have the main truss going through the east-west axis of the house, bolted at the apex, and then at the bottom of the pillar, I have these 2x4s bolted in this diamond configuration. Now the idea, if my mechanics and my engineering and everything is correct, is that any weight that presses down on the top of the roof, the natural tendency will be to push out on these 2x6s and put stress on the walls. To counteract that, this center pillar acts as a lever, and as the top gets pressed down, the force gets transferred to the bottom, which then pulls on these 2x4s, transferring the weight back to the 2x6s, pulling in the opposite direction. So any force one way is counteracted by force in the other direction. So it tends to stabilize itself out. And then the center ridge lines, there's going to be 3 of them. I've put in one today. Let me see if I can get you a better angle on it. They go from the center support pillar across to these uprights. There's going to be 3 of them. And then there's going to be these diagonals that go from the apex down to the bottom. And they're going to be bolted. Let me see. Yeah, right there. Bolted in the middle. So any force that goes down is also going to be transferred along these diagonals, and then this bolted joint in the center is also going to be transferred to these ridge lines, so a lot of the force is going to be transferred to the strongest part of the house, into these 4x6 cross beams. So, instead of a traditional method, would be to take all the force in this large main living area, concentrate it on a center pillar put into the ground, and take away valuable space from the center of the house. The idea instead is any force that's put on this center area of the house is instead going to be spread to the extremities. It's a novel idea. It's definitely new, I think. And this building is going to be the first practical test as to whether a design like this actually works. I mean, it'll either work great or our roof will fall on our heads the first heavy snow we get. I don't know. We'll see. But I think it's got some sound concepts, and it's going to be pretty trippy from the outside too. You'll have to wait until I get some more built before you could get more of an idea of what it's going to look like. This roof is so weird that I can't really describe it to you. You're just going to have to see it. Then maybe you'll understand. Just do a little test, a primitive test to show you that this is definitely working, at least some, is that I can hang on it and lift myself on it, and it supports my weight, and it doesn't seem to be shifting. So, first test, successful. It'll hold my weight. I don't intend for anyone that weighs more than me to get on this roof or to be anywhere near me. So, as long as it holds me up, that's all I care about. For some of the main weight-bearing points where the roof is going to rest on the walls, they're attached to the walls by drilling holes and then driving 2.5-foot lengths of rebar through the wood into the walls below. The 4x6s are attached that way at each end, and then over there, that span there and this span here is also attached with rebar. Driving this rebar has given me my first major repetitive use injury in my life. I have tennis elbow, and of course it has to be in my right elbow. Swinging that 3-pound sledge has just really taken it out of me. I just hope I could keep on doing it through this building project. One little thing that I want to show is a test of the strength of our stucco. This section of the wall was already stuccoed when I put this board in, and we were very worried when the time came for me to drive in that rebar and start hammering on it with a sledgehammer. This was the ultimate test. Would this stucco break? Would it start falling off the walls with that constant repetitive hammering? But it didn't. It passed with absolute flying colors. It didn't hurt it the least bit, so we now have full confidence this stucco is strong, hard as steel, and is not going anywhere, man. This stucco is strong. Probably some of the strongest stucco you will ever find in a building. I got this half of the living room, the rafters installed. I got all the rafters installed, the main rafters anyway, on the bedroom. All the ridge lines in, and we have managed to also put the main rafters in the kitchen right behind me. And see if you can get a good view from the inside. My center column has had a lot of new members added to it. So far it seems to be holding. Fitting the rafters in was not an easy challenge, but thank God I'd bought a bunch of right angle brackets before I started this project. I had them in mind for something else, but if I didn't have those right angle brackets, I would not be able to do this. Sometimes they're the only way to put these rafters in at these apexes. Another difficulty that I've been running into is that some of these fit-ups require compound miter cuts, and I'm having limitations not only with my knowledge and practice, but also with my tools. I don't have quite the saws to do that. So any professional framing carpenters who are watching these videos, if they notice the poor fit-ups of some of these cuts, my sincere apologies. But they fit and they do work, and sometimes that's why you have to have a reciprocating saw. Sometimes if you don't have the right saw, you could use a reciprocating saw and fake it, which is what I've been having to do. But well, day 3's in the can, and I'm happy to report that I got the main rafters up. The entire roof is framed, at least the main rafters. Let's go see what we've done, shall we? There we are. The main living area, all the main rafters in. So you can see, try and get you a better angle on it. Then, also, the utility room has its main rafters over it. And the surprise is the bathroom, because I had to get creative. I had a few problems. First problem was the slope on this side was a lot lower than I thought it would be, so I realized I didn't have enough room to attach on here and take a slope down over the bathroom like I'd intended. But I mean, I was first depressed, and I had to think about it. A little thought. There might have been some alcohol involved, but in vino veritas, an idea popped into my head that I toyed with for a while. I have always had this idea of having an observation deck on top of my house, a platform, sun porch, whatever, and then I realized The bathroom is the smallest, tightest, strongest part of the house, so I wouldn't have to worry about load bearing, and it was an absolutely perfect place. So I decided to just frame around and put a flat observation deck platform on top of the bathroom. So that's what we did. Put the main joists in. And so instead of a roof, that is going to be a new feature of this house, is going to have an observation deck sunbathing platform. I've always wanted something like that. A place to put a telescope, or maybe a place to go and get some sun, you know, but now I have it. Little technical note. Down here, they started to have a problem because the wall leaned just a little bit. Didn't notice it at the time of building, but it leaned enough. Like I said, this stuff is sticky, but it can't combat gravity. So they were starting to have a problem with it falling off. So what they did was they built some dirty cement, just some cement and crappy dirt, mixed it up, and what they did was they just piled it all along this bottom here so they could build a flat face. And once they did that, they just put the stucco on the outside, and everything went along great. So one man in 3 days got a roof on a round house basically framed. How you like them apples? Now we're on day 7. Coming to the end, I did all this work on the roof on my paid vacation from work, and I gotta go back tomorrow. But I didn't get the entire roof put in, but I'm not beating myself up. I got a lot of it put in. And in the same time, we are almost 3/4 of the way around on the stuccoing of the house. We've only got the back stretch left to do. So that ought to be done in a few days, and I'll just keep on going, and finish paneling the roof. Might take me another week or two, but this house is going to be undercover soon. So since the last time we met each other, what do we got? We got soil cement subfloors waiting for their cap. We got stucco. We got a roof. So I've made a lot of progress. One of the big things I ran into was these troughs between the peaks, because I discovered that they also curve. So I actually had to bend the wafer board as I applied it to the roof. So a lot of it was almost like putting the skin on a boat. I mean, it was by far the most challenging woodworking job I've ever had to do. I've had to make a lot of little discoveries as I went along. But that's the way it happens sometimes. Sometimes you just have to do the thing that you don't know how to do, and you get the knowledge after you do it. That's probably how most of the great cathedrals were built. They made it up as they went along. But anyway, here we are, roof frame. We got panel over all of it coming together. Got a bit more paneling to do, but roof is going on, and stucco is coming along splendidly. So I'm feeling really good about it. Made a lot of progress, and we're going to keep on making as much progress as we can on this project. I got to finish this roof, got to cap the floor, and in the next month I got to get a rocket stove in here. So that will be featured in the next episode, as much as I can possibly do. I gotta get as much done on this before the snow flies this winter. But things are coming along. We're making progress. So until next time, from South Central Oregon, this is Matthew Ravenhook for the Phoenix Rising Project on September 24th, 2016. Signing off. God bless.